Shelter puppies clung to each other before euthanasia. Then the vet made a shocking discovery. Dr. Rachel Carter arrived at the Hope Animal Shelter in New York City on a cold Monday morning, the crisp autumn air doing little to ease the heaviness in her heart. The weekend had given her a brief respite, but as she stepped inside the facility, she was reminded of the difficult task ahead. No amount of experience could ever make this part of her job any easier. As she walked through the shelter's narrow hallways, the familiar sounds of barking and soft whimpers filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence weighing on her mind. She knew that today would be another difficult day, one that she had come to dread every time it arose. As she entered her small but organized office, she let out a deep sigh and sat at her desk, hesitating before reaching for the stack of files in front of her. The shelter's policy was strict. Any animal that could not recover, did not respond to treatment, and was suffering had to be euthanized. It was a necessary but heart-wrenching decision, made only when all medical interventions had failed. Rachel had always fought against it, exhausting every possible treatment before considering such an option. She and her team had dedicated themselves to saving as many lives as possible, but sometimes, despite their best efforts, there was nothing more they could do. She reached for the list of animals scheduled for euthanasia that day, her eyes scanning the names until she came across two familiar ones, Buddy and Charlie. A painful lump formed in her throat. These weren't just any dogs. They were two inseparable puppies who had stolen the hearts of the entire shelter staff. Buddy and Charlie had been found abandoned near a busy intersection in Brooklyn, barely surviving the harsh city streets. A good Samaritan had spotted them dodging cars and scavenging for food, their tiny bodies weak from malnourishment. When they were brought into the shelter, it became clear that they were inseparable, always huddling close for warmth and comfort. Even in their weakest moments, they had each other. Despite weeks of care, medication, and treatments, Buddy and Charlie's condition had not improved. The shelter's veterinarians had tried everything, but the puppies continued to deteriorate. Their breathing was labored, their energy depleted, and the once hopeful fight in their eyes had dimmed. Rachel leaned back in her chair, staring at the names on the list. She had done everything she could, but nothing had worked. She knew what had to be done, but the thought of putting down two innocent lives who had already endured so much felt unbearable. Still, she had to believe she was making the most humane choice, to relieve them of their suffering. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her strength and stood up. It was time to do what she had been dreading all morning. But as she made her way toward the kennel where Buddy and Charlie were kept, she had no idea that what she was about to witness would change everything. Dr. Rachel Carter walked toward the kennel where Buddy and Charlie were kept, her heart growing heavier with each step. She had steeled herself for what needed to be done, yet a part of her still held on to the lingering pain of making such a decision. No matter how many times she had faced this situation before, it never got easier. As she approached their enclosure, the familiar sight of the two puppies curled up together met her eyes. Buddy, the slightly larger of the two, had his front paw draped protectively over Charlie, as if shielding his smaller friend from the world. Their bodies were pressed together so closely that they almost seemed like one, sharing warmth and comfort in a way that spoke volumes about their bond. Rachel felt her chest tighten. How could she possibly separate them, even in their final moments? She knelt beside them, reaching through the bars to gently stroke their fur. Buddy's ears twitched slightly at her touch, but neither pup moved. Their breathing was slow and synchronized, as if they had already accepted their fate. Were they aware of what was about to happen? Did animals have an instinct about these things? Rachel had always wondered, but today the thought troubled her more than ever. Taking a deep breath, she softly called their names. Buddy, Charlie. Her voice was barely above a whisper. At first, there was no reaction. But then, as if sensing her presence, Buddy lifted his head slowly and gazed at her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Rachel saw something she hadn't expected: hope. Buddy's gaze was not dull or lifeless. Instead, there was a spark, a quiet but determined fight that refused to be extinguished. His brown eyes searched hers, and it was almost as if he was pleading with her, silently asking her for one more chance. Charlie stirred at Buddy's movement and snuggled in closer, his tiny body pressing deeper into the warmth of his friend. Rachel noticed something peculiar. Charlie's breathing had stabilized. The labored, shallow breaths that had been a constant struggle for the puppy were suddenly even and calm, her brows furrowed in confusion. That wasn't normal. Just moments ago, Charlie had been struggling to breathe properly, yet now, wrapped in Buddy's embrace, he was completely at ease. A sudden realization hit her. Could Buddy be helping Charlie in a way that medicine could not? Was it possible that their bond, something emotional, something far beyond science, was having a physical effect on Charlie's health? Rachel hesitated, her hand still resting gently on Buddy's head. She needed to be sure. Carefully, she reached in and gently separated the two puppies, lifting Charlie slightly away from Buddy's warmth. The change was instantaneous. Charlie whimpered softly, his body trembling as his breathing immediately became erratic again. He struggled against Rachel's gentle hold, his tiny paws reaching toward Buddy as if desperate to return to the safety of his friend. Rachel's heart pounded as she watched the distress unfold. Quickly, she placed Charlie back next to Buddy, watching closely. As soon as he was reunited with his friend, his breathing slowed again, becoming steady and controlled. His small body relaxed against Buddy's, the fear in his eyes melting away as he pressed close once more. Rachel's mind raced. This wasn't just coincidence. Something incredible was happening here, something she had never encountered in all her years as a veterinarian. Could Buddy's presence truly be keeping Charlie alive? Her heart pounded with newfound urgency. The decision she had been so certain of only moments ago now seemed completely wrong. If Buddy was somehow providing the support Charlie needed to survive, then separating them, worse, euthanizing them, could be a devastating mistake. Rachel stood up abruptly, her mind made up. She had to stop everything. This wasn't over. Not yet. Dr. Rachel Carter stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. What she had just witnessed defied logic. Charlie's breathing stabilized when he was with Buddy, but worsened the moment they were separated. It wasn't a fluke. Something deeper was at play here. Something beyond medicine, beyond the clinical explanations she had relied on throughout her career. Rachel knew she had to act fast. If there was even the slightest chance that Buddy was somehow helping Charlie heal, then putting them down would be a grave mistake. Her heart pounded as she turned away from the kennel, determination replacing the sadness she had carried all morning. She rushed back to her office, flipping open Charlie's medical file. The records were clear. His respiratory condition had been worsening for weeks. No treatment had made a difference. Yet now, in Buddy's presence, he was suddenly showing signs of improvement. Rachel took out her stethoscope and hurried back to the kennel. If she was going to stop this, she needed evidence. Kneeling beside the puppies once more, she placed the stethoscope against Charlie's tiny chest. His heartbeat was stronger than it had been in previous checkups. His breathing, which had been labored and shallow, was now steady and rhythmic. It was almost as if Buddy's warmth, his presence, was acting as a natural therapy for Charlie's fragile body. She took a deep breath and gently lifted Charlie away again, this time monitoring his vitals closely. Within seconds, his heart rate spiked, and his breathing became erratic once more. A soft whimper escaped him, and his body tensed as he struggled. Rachel felt her throat tighten. This was real. Quickly, she placed Charlie back against Buddy, and like clockwork, the puppy calmed down almost immediately. His breath slowed. His heart rate returned to normal. His tiny paws pressed into Buddy's fur, seeking the comfort he so desperately needed. Rachel's mind was reeling. How was this possible? Could it be that Buddy's presence was triggering a physiological response in Charlie, something that medical treatment alone had failed to achieve? Was their emotional bond so strong that it had a direct impact on Charlie's survival? She had read studies before about how companionship could influence healing, both in humans and animals. Emotional connections had been shown to reduce stress levels, improve immune function, and even speed up recovery in some cases. But she had never seen it so clearly, so undeniably, right in front of her. Rachel knew she couldn't make this decision alone. She needed a second opinion. Without wasting another second, she rushed to find Dr. Mark Evans, the shelter's senior veterinarian. When she found him in the medical wing, she barely stopped to catch her breath. "Mark, I need you to see something. Now." He raised an eyebrow at her urgency, but followed her without question. Back at the kennel, Rachel quickly explained what she had observed. Mark listened carefully, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Then he knelt beside the puppies and repeated the same test Rachel had done, first monitoring Charlie's vitals while he was with Buddy, then checking them again when they were apart. He pulled back, stunned. This isn't normal." His voice was laced with disbelief. "You might actually be right, Rachel. Buddy could be keeping him alive." Rachel exhaled, relief washing over her. Mark stood up decisively, shaking his head in amazement. "We can't go through with the euthanasia, not until we understand this better." Rachel nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." At that moment, she realized that what had started as one of the hardest days of her career had just turned into something extraordinary. The two puppies who were supposed to take their last breaths today had just been given a second chance at life. And Rachel was determined to uncover the mystery behind their incredible bond. A new hope, an unconventional treatment, begins. Dr. Rachel Carter felt a wave of relief wash over her as she and Dr. Mark Evans made their way back to the medical wing. The decision was clear. Buddy and Charlie would not be euthanized. Instead, they would explore a new approach, one that had never been attempted at the shelter before. Rachel knew she was treading on uncharted territory. The shelter's policies were strict. Medical treatments followed structured guidelines, and unconventional methods were rarely entertained. However, what she had witnessed in that kennel was undeniable. Buddy's presence was stabilizing Charlie's health, and if there was even the slightest chance that keeping them together could save his life, they had to try. Rachel sat down at her desk and began reviewing medical research. She pulled up studies on the effects of emotional bonds on recovery, recalling cases where companionship had played a significant role in healing, both in humans and animals. Scientific studies had shown that animals experiencing stress or trauma produced higher levels of cortisol, a hormone that could weaken the immune system. However, when comforted by a companion, cortisol levels dropped and the body entered a more relaxed, healing state. Could it be that Buddy was acting as Charlie's emotional support system? Rachel and Mark gathered the shelter's medical team and presented their findings. Some were skeptical, but others were intrigued. The evidence was there. Charlie's vitals had improved only when he was near Buddy. It was a phenomenon that couldn't be ignored. "So what's the plan?" one of the vet techs asked. Rachel took a deep breath. "We change the way we treat them. No more separation. From now on, Buddy and Charlie stay together at all times. We'll monitor their vitals closely and track any improvements. If Buddy truly is aiding in Charlie's recovery, we'll prove it with data." A new treatment approach. Over the next several weeks, Rachel and her team implemented a groundbreaking treatment plan that focused not only on physical care, but also emotional well-being. They kept Buddy and Charlie together at all times, even during medical checkups and treatments. Charlie's condition was monitored daily, recording his breathing patterns, heart rate, and stress levels. Buddy was given a special role. Instead of undergoing treatment separately, he was encouraged to comfort Charlie throughout the process. They introduced gentle therapy sessions, including calm music, soft bedding, and time in a low-stress environment. At first, the team was unsure if it would work, but then the results came in. By the end of the first week, Charlie's vitals showed signs of improvement. His breathing was more stable, and his episodes of distress had decreased significantly. By the third week, He had gained weight, his energy levels increased, and for the first time since arriving at the shelter, he played with Buddy. By the 6th week, Charlie was almost unrecognizable from the frail, struggling puppy he had once been. He was stronger, livelier, and healthier than anyone had expected. The staff watched in awe. Buddy had been the key all along. Rachel knew she had made the right call. For the first time in her career, she had witnessed the power of love and emotional connection as a form of medicine. And for Buddy and Charlie, it had meant the difference between life and death. A story that touched the world. As Buddy and Charlie's condition continued to improve, Dr. Rachel Carter knew she had witnessed something truly extraordinary. This was more than just a medical recovery. It was a testament to the power of companionship, love, and second chances. She felt compelled to share their story, not just to celebrate their miraculous journey, but to spread awareness about how emotional bonds could impact healing. One evening, after finishing her rounds at the Hope Animal Shelter, Rachel sat down at her desk and carefully crafted a post for the shelter's social media page. She included photos of Buddy and Charlie from their first days at the shelter, frail, weak, and clinging to each other for comfort. Then, she added recent images, where the two puppies now looked healthier and more energetic, their tails wagging happily. Meet Buddy and Charlie, two puppies who proved that love can heal. When Charlie was at his weakest, Buddy refused to leave his side. Against all odds, their incredible bond became the key to Charlie's recovery. What science couldn't fix, love did. This is the power of second chances. Rachel hit post and expected nothing more than a handful of likes and shares from local followers. But what happened next took everyone by surprise. An unexpected viral sensation. Within hours, the post began gaining traction. Animal lovers from all over the country started commenting, sharing, and reacting to the story. Messages poured in, some from people who had rescued pets, others from those who had experienced similar emotional connections with their animals. By the next morning, the story of Buddy and Charlie had been shared thousands of times. Major animal welfare organizations reposted the story, and soon, news outlets began reaching out. Dr. Carter, we'd love to feature Buddy and Charlie's incredible story in our next segment. Hope Animal Shelter, your post has gone viral. Would you be open to an interview? Can we visit the shelter and meet these two miracle puppies in person? Rachel was stunned. She never imagined that one decision, choosing hope over euthanasia, would turn into a national conversation. The power of compassion inspires the world. As Buddy and Charlie's story spread, something incredible happened. Donations started flooding in. People who had been moved by the story wanted to help, not just Buddy and Charlie, but other shelter animals in need. In just a few weeks, the shelter received more funding than it had in the past year combined. Thanks to the generosity of strangers, they were able to upgrade medical equipment to improve care for sick and injured animals, expand rehabilitation programs for animals with trauma or severe medical conditions, cover treatment costs for more dogs and cats who might have been euthanized otherwise. Even more heartwarming, the shelter saw a dramatic increase in pet adoptions. People who had read about Buddy and Charlie's bond were inspired to visit the shelter and give other animals a second chance. "We saw their story online and knew we had to come," one family said as they adopted a senior dog that had been at the shelter for months. "I never thought about adopting before, but this story changed my perspective," another visitor admitted. It was clear. Buddy and Charlie's journey had become more than just their own. They had sparked a movement of love, second chances, and the belief that no life should be given up on too soon. But one question remained. As the world fell in love with Buddy and Charlie, Rachel found herself facing the next challenge. What would happen to them now? They had survived against all odds, but they still needed a forever home. The shelter had received adoption requests, but there was one non-negotiable requirement. Buddy and Charlie had to be adopted together. Would they find a family willing to give them the home they deserved? Rachel could only hope. But after everything that had happened, she had learned one thing for certain. miracles had a way of finding those who needed them the most. A forever home for Buddy and Charlie. As the days passed, Buddy and Charlie's story continued to spread, touching the hearts of thousands. The shelter had received countless inquiries from people who wanted to adopt them, but there was one major obstacle. They couldn't be separated. Many people interested in adoption had only been looking for one dog, but Buddy and Charlie were inseparable. Their bond had saved Charlie's life, and separating them now could undo all the progress they had made. They needed a home where they could stay together, forever. Despite the overwhelming support, no one had yet stepped forward to adopt them as a pair. Dr. Rachel Carter couldn't help but worry. What if no one came? What if they had survived everything, only to end up waiting in the shelter indefinitely? Then, one evening, just as Rachel was preparing to leave for the day, her phone rang. An unexpected call. "Dr. Carter, I'm calling about Buddy and Charlie," a warm voice said on the other end. "I saw their story on the news, and I knew I had to reach out." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the family they had been hoping for? The caller introduced herself as Linda Dawson, a woman from a quiet countryside town 2 hours outside New York City. She and her family had always been passionate about rescuing animals, and when she saw Buddy and Charlie's story, she felt an instant connection. "We have a large property, plenty of space for them to run around, and most importantly, a home filled with love," Linda explained. "But I want to make sure we're the right fit. Would it be possible to come meet them?" Rachel felt a wave of excitement and relief. "Absolutely. We'd love to have you come by." The perfect match. A few days later, Linda and her family arrived at the shelter. As soon as they entered, Buddy and Charlie's tails started wagging furiously, sensing that something special was happening. Linda knelt down to their level, gently stroking their fur. "Hey there, little guys," she whispered. "I've been waiting to meet you." Charlie, who had once been shy and hesitant around strangers, snuggled close to Buddy, but didn't pull away. It was a sign that he felt safe. Buddy, always the protective one, wagged his tail and licked Linda's hand as if giving his approval. As Rachel and the shelter staff observed, it became clear that this was the right home. Linda's family understood their bond, and, more importantly, they were willing to give them the life they deserved, together. After discussing the adoption process and ensuring everything was in place, Rachel made it official. Buddy and Charlie had found their forever home. A bittersweet goodbye. As much as Rachel was overjoyed, saying goodbye was not easy. These two puppies had not only defied the odds, but had changed her perspective on veterinary care, love, and second chances. As Linda and her family prepared to leave, Rachel knelt beside Buddy and Charlie one last time. "You both have come so far," she said, gently scratching behind their ears. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." It was almost as if they understood. Buddy nuzzled against Rachel's hand, while Charlie gave a small, grateful lick. As they drove off with their new family, Rachel watched from the shelter entrance, her heart full. This was what rescue work was about, giving animals a second chance at life, at love, at family. The legacy of Buddy and Charlie. The impact of their story did not end with their adoption. Their new family continued sharing updates online, showing Buddy and Charlie thriving in their new home. They had acres of land to explore, cozy beds to sleep in, and most importantly, each other. Beyond that, their journey had sparked a movement. More people than ever before had come forward to adopt shelter animals, and donations to the shelter had doubled. Because of Buddy and Charlie, more animals were getting second chances. One evening, as Rachel scrolled through photos of them playing in the countryside, she felt a tear slip down her cheek. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. She had almost made the biggest mistake of her career. But because she chose to look deeper, to believe in love over protocol, Buddy and Charlie had lived. And in return, they had changed the world, one heart at a time.